The summer heat beat down on the busy streets of downtown Chicago as 12-year-old Sarah adjusted her backpack, trying to navigate through the sea of suits and briefcases. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her usual route home from the community center took her through quieter neighborhoods. But today, something pulled her toward the gleaming skyscrapers that seemed to touch the clouds. Lost in the unfamiliar territory, Sarah's heart raced as she realized she had wandered into the business district. The towering glass buildings all looked the same, reflecting the late afternoon sun. Just as anxiety started creeping in, she noticed a man in an expensive suit pacing back and forth, frustration evident on his face as he stared at his phone. Being raised by a single mom who always taught her to help others, Sarah hesitated for just a moment before approaching him. "Excuse me, sir. Are you lost?" she asked, her voice steady despite her nervousness. The man, probably in his 50s with graying temples and kind eyes, looked up from his phone, clearly surprised by the young girl's question. "Actually, yes," he chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "I'm supposed to be at an important meeting in 5 minutes, and my GPS keeps sending me in circles. I'm looking for the Wellington Building." As the chief financial officer of a major corporation, Richard wasn't used to asking for directions, especially from a middle school student. But something about Sarah's confident smile made him listen. "Oh, I just passed that." Sarah's face lit up. "You're going the wrong way. See that building with the green tinted windows? Go past it, take a left at the coffee shop, and the Wellington Building is the tall one with the curved entrance. Can't miss it." Her hands moved animatedly as she explained, pointing out landmarks rather than street names. Richard checked his watch, relief washing over his face. Following her directions would get him there just in time. But before hurrying off, he paused, struck by this young girl's willingness to help a stranger when many adults had simply rushed past him. "Thank you so much," he said sincerely. "You know, most people wouldn't have stopped to help." Sarah shrugged, adjusting her backpack again. "My mom always says we rise by lifting others," she replied with wisdom beyond her years. What happened next would change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Richard reached into his pocket, but not for the usual quick thank you that most would expect. Instead, he pulled out a business card and did something that would spark a chain of events leading to an extraordinary journey of mentorship, opportunity, and breaking down societal barriers. The story of how a simple act of kindness from a young black girl from the South Side and an unexpected response from a white executive would go on to inspire thousands and challenge perceptions about race, age, and social status in corporate America. But at that moment, standing on that busy Chicago street, neither Sarah nor Richard knew they were about to become part of something much bigger than themselves. As Sarah would later tell news reporters, "I just saw someone who needed help. I didn't see his suit, his status, or his skin color. I just saw another human being." The security camera footage from that day, which would later go viral, captured those first few minutes of their encounter. But it couldn't capture the most important thing, the beginning of a story that would touch hearts across the nation and prove that sometimes the smallest actions can spark the biggest changes. That business card would remain untouched in Sarah's backpack for 3 days. She'd almost forgotten about it until her mother, Lisa, was sorting through her daughter's school things while doing weekend laundry. "What's this?" she asked, holding up the slightly bent card with raised gold lettering. Sarah told her about helping the lost businessmen, expecting her mother to be upset about her talking to strangers downtown. Instead, Lisa sat down on their worn couch, tears welling up in her eyes. "Baby, do you know what company this is?" she whispered, running her fingers over the embossed logo. Richard Thompson, it turned out, wasn't just any executive. He was the CFO of one of the largest financial institutions in the Midwest, the same company that had rejected Lisa's loan application for her small catering business 3 times over the past 2 years. The irony wasn't lost on Lisa. Her daughter had helped the very person whose signature might have been on those rejection letters. But Lisa wasn't bitter. She'd raised Sarah to see the good in people, even when life wasn't fair. Working 2 jobs to support them meant Lisa couldn't always be there after school, but she'd made sure Sarah grew up with strong values and a kind heart. The following Monday, Richard couldn't shake the memory of his encounter with Sarah. During his morning meeting, he found himself distracted, doodling on his notepad while thinking about the young girl's selfless act. Something about her reminded him of his own humble beginnings, long before the corner office and company car. His colleagues noticed his unusual quietness, but none dared to ask what was on his mind. That afternoon, Richard's assistant brought in a stack of community outreach proposals, something he usually skimmed through quickly. But today was different. He thought about Sarah's backpack, worn at the edges, and her mention of the community center. A quick search revealed that youth programs in her neighborhood had faced severe budget cuts over the past year. Meanwhile, Sarah went about her normal routine, unaware of the ripples her simple act of kindness had created. At the community center, where she spent her afternoons while her mom worked, she helped younger kids with their homework. The center was struggling, the air conditioning barely worked, and they were down to their last few computers. But Sarah never complained. She was grateful for the safe space and the caring staff who looked out for her. Word of Sarah's encounter with Richard had spread through the office grapevine. Some executives scoffed at the idea that a schoolgirl had guided their CFO through downtown. Others were touched by the story, seeing it as a sign that perhaps their corporate social responsibility programs needed a serious overhaul. As Richard sat in his office late one evening, looking out over the city lights, he made a decision that would raise eyebrows across the corporate world. He picked up his phone and called the head of their community relations department. "I want to know everything about our youth programs in the South Side," he said, "and I mean everything." What Richard discovered would shock him. The disparity between their marketing materials, touting community involvement, and the reality on the ground was stark. The same institution that spent millions on corporate events had barely invested in the neighborhoods that needed it most. But how could he bridge this gap? And more importantly, how could he ensure that bright young minds like Sarah's wouldn't be lost to a system that often overlooked them? Just then, his phone buzzed. It was an email from an unexpected source, containing information that would turn this story in a direction no one saw coming. The email that lit up Richard's screen was from Lisa, Sarah's mother. She had taken a leap of faith and reached out, not to ask for anything, but to thank him for showing kindness to her daughter that day. Her words were simple but powerful, describing their life in the South Side and her dreams of expanding her small catering business to create jobs for other single parents in the community. Richard sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the coincidence. Just hours ago, he had been reviewing community investment proposals, and now here was a real story, a real opportunity for change landing in his inbox. But corporate politics were complicated, and he knew that what he was considering would face resistance from the board. News of Sarah's encounter had reached the local press, who were eager to spin it into a feel-good story about a random act of kindness. But both Sarah and Richard knew it was about something much bigger. The community center where Sarah spent her afternoons was now facing closure, threatening to displace hundreds of kids who relied on its after-school programs. During a tense board meeting, Richard stood before his colleagues, his presentation ready. "We spend millions on marketing our community involvement," he began, his voice firm. "But when was the last time any of us actually visited these communities?" The room fell silent. He shared Sarah's story, but not as a heartwarming anecdote, as a wake-up call. Meanwhile, Sarah faced her own challenges. Some kids at school had seen the security camera footage online and were teasing her about being a goody-goody. But Sarah remained unbothered, channeling her energy into organizing a student petition to save the community center. Her determination caught the attention of local community leaders, who were impressed by her initiative. Lisa's catering business was down to its last few dollars, and she was considering giving up her dream entirely. The rejection letters from banks were piling up, each one citing the same reason: insufficient collateral. She hadn't told Sarah about their financial struggles, but the worry lines on her face grew deeper each day. Richard found himself at a crossroads. His proposal for a major community investment program, inspired by Sarah, had received pushback from several board members who deemed it too risky and not aligned with shareholder interests. The pressure to maintain the status quo was intense, and his position as CFO was being quietly questioned. One rainy evening, as Sarah and her mother walked home from the bus stop, they noticed unusual activity at the community center. News vans were parked outside, and a crowd had gathered despite the weather. Someone had leaked information about the center's imminent closure to the media, and the story had gone viral. Inside his office, Richard held a sealed envelope containing documents that could either make him a corporate hero or end his career. The decision he was about to make would not only affect Sarah and her community, but could potentially reshape how corporate America approached community investment. Just then, his phone rang. It was the board chairman, and the conversation that followed would set in motion a series of events that would leave everyone speechless. As thunder rolled outside his office window, Richard realized there was no turning back from what he was about to do. The chairman's words hit Richard like a thunderbolt. A competing investment firm had launched a hostile takeover bid, using the recent media attention around Sarah's story to paint the company as out of touch with local communities. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps, Richard thought, it couldn't have been better. While the corporate drama unfolded downtown, Sarah faced an unexpected crisis of her own. The community center's aging roof had partially collapsed during the storm, forcing an immediate evacuation. As rain poured through the ceiling, Sarah watched volunteers scrambling to save computers and books. The center's closure, which had been looming in the future, was now an immediate reality. Lisa's phone buzzed with a notification. Her catering business's last major client had canceled their contract, citing budget cuts. She sat at their small kitchen table, holding back tears as she calculated the bills. The emergency fund she'd been building for Sarah's college was now their only lifeline. But unknown to them, Richard's sealed envelope contained more than just community investment proposals. Through careful investigation, he had uncovered a troubling pattern. Several minority-owned businesses in Sarah's neighborhood, including Lisa's catering company, had been systematically denied loans despite meeting all qualifications. The evidence suggested discriminatory lending practices that went back years. The media circus intensified as leaked documents revealed the hostile takeover bid. Business networks buzzed with speculation about the company's future. But amid the corporate uncertainty, Sarah refused to give up. She organized a community meeting in their local church basement, the only available space after the center's closure. Richard's decision became even more complicated when he received an anonymous email containing internal communications about the loan rejections. The timestamp showed it had been sent from within the company's executive floor. Someone on his own team was either trying to help him or set him up for a fall. As Sarah stood before the gathered community members, her voice steady despite her nerves, she shared her vision for not just saving the center, but transforming it into a hub for local entrepreneurship. The crowd included faces she'd never expected to see: local business owners, teachers, and even a few suits from downtown who had slipped in quietly. Meanwhile, Lisa received an unexpected visit from a senior loan officer who had recently quit Richard's company. He carried a stack of documents and a story that would change everything, revealing why her loan applications had really been denied and who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Richard sat in his car outside the church, the sealed envelope on his passenger seat feeling heavier than ever. Through the windows, he could hear Sarah's voice carrying across the packed room. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from board members and reporters, but he had silenced it. What he was about to do would either save everything or cost him everything. Just then, Sarah spotted him through the church window. Their eyes met, and in that moment, both realized that this story had grown far beyond a simple act of kindness on a Chicago street. As Richard reached for his car door, his hand trembling slightly, a news van screeched to a halt in the church parking lot. The reporter jumped out, waving a document that would throw everyone's plans into chaos. The reporter's document was a bombshell, internal memos revealing that Richard's own signature had been forged on dozens of loan rejection letters, including Lisa's. Someone had been systematically undermining loan applications from minority communities while making it appear that Richard was responsible. The forgeries were sophisticated, but there was one detail they couldn't fake. Richard had been out of the country on the dates several key rejections were signed. Inside the church, Sarah's community meeting had transformed into something larger. Local business owners began sharing similar stories of rejected loans and missed opportunities. Lisa stood up, her voice shaking but determined, and shared her own struggle. The room fell silent as Richard walked in, carrying both the sealed envelope and a resolve that would change everything. "I'm not here as a CFO today," Richard began, his voice echoing through the church. "I'm here as someone who was shown kindness by a young girl who had every reason not to help me." He revealed his own humble beginnings, how he'd started as a janitor in the banking industry, working night shifts to put himself through school. The room watched in stunned silence as he opened the sealed envelope. Inside was his resignation letter, but not just that. Along with it was a comprehensive plan to establish a $50 million community development fund, with oversight from local leaders. The hostile takeover bid had given him unexpected leverage. The board would have to choose, accept his proposal or risk losing public trust during a crucial merger battle. But the biggest surprise came from Sarah. While everyone had been focused on the corporate drama, she had been quietly building something remarkable. The petition she'd started had gathered over 100,000 signatures, attracting attention from state legislators. She had transformed a simple Save the Center campaign into a movement for community banking reform. Lisa's former loan officer stepped forward, providing the final piece of the puzzle. The forgeries were traced back to a small group of middle managers who had been profiting from steering loans toward preferred clients. Their scheme had gone undetected for years, hidden behind layers of corporate bureaucracy. Richard pulled out his phone and dialed the board chairman on speaker. The church fell silent as he delivered an ultimatum: approve the community fund and implement strict lending reforms, or he would take everything he had uncovered to federal regulators. The chairman's response was immediate. The board would hold an emergency session within the hour. As they waited for the board's decision, Sarah shared her own surprise. She had been accepted into a prestigious Young Entrepreneurs program, and her first project proposal was a plan to transform the community center into a business incubator for local startups. The same determination that had led her to help a lost executive was now paving the way for community-wide change. The chairman called back just as the sun was setting. The board had not only approved Richard's proposal but had doubled the community fund to $100 million. The hostile takeover bid had been withdrawn, and federal investigators were already looking into the loan forgery scheme. But the real victory wasn't in the money or the corporate politics. As Sarah and Richard stood together at the podium, they represented something more powerful: how a simple act of kindness could spark a movement for change. Lisa's catering business would become the first recipient of the new community fund, and the renovated community center would house her first commercial kitchen. The story could have ended there, but Sarah had one final surprise for everyone. She reached into her backpack and pulled out Richard's business card, the one he'd given her that first day. On the back, she had written something that would become the motto of their new community initiative: "We rise by lifting others, but we soar by lifting together." 1 year later, the transformed community center buzzed with activity. The once leaking roof had been replaced with a rooftop garden where Lisa's catering business grew fresh herbs and vegetables. The computer lab where Sarah used to help younger kids with homework had expanded into a full technology training center, providing coding classes and business skills workshops to local residents. Lisa's catering company had grown beyond her wildest dreams. She now employed 15 other single parents from the neighborhood, and her business model of flexible scheduling and shared childcare responsibilities had become a case study in community-centered entrepreneurship. The commercial kitchen in the center's basement served as both a training ground for new food businesses and a commissary kitchen for local food entrepreneurs. Richard had stepped down as CFO, but not in the way anyone expected. He now headed the company's newly created Community Investment Division, working directly with neighborhood leaders to ensure fair lending practices. The loan officers who had perpetrated the forgery scheme faced federal charges, and their cases sparked industry-wide reforms in lending practices. Sarah's Young Entrepreneurs program had exceeded all expectations. Under her leadership, student teams had launched 5 successful community businesses, from a bicycle repair shop to a tutoring service. She still found time to help lost strangers, though now she usually directed them to the center's new visitor information desk. The security camera footage that had once gone viral found new life as part of a national advertising campaign promoting community banking initiatives. But the real story spread through countless small moments, like when a group of executives from other financial institutions toured the center, led by a confident Sarah explaining how community investment could transform lives. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Sarah and Richard sat on a bench outside the center, sharing lunch from Lisa's catering service. You know, Richard said, watching kids play basketball on the new court. I spent years thinking success meant bigger offices and higher profits. But real success is seeing a community thrive. Sarah smiled, thinking about how much had changed. The center now served twice as many families, and its programs had been replicated in 3 other neighborhoods. Lisa's catering business had just won a contract to provide meals for all of them. Mom always says success isn't about how high you climb, Sarah replied, but about how many people you bring with you. The hostile takeover attempt had become a footnote in corporate history, but its impact lingered in positive ways. Other companies, seeing the success of the community investment model, had started similar programs. The neighborhood that had once been marked by closed storefronts and limited opportunities now bustled with new businesses, many owned by graduates of the center's programs. As the sun set over Chicago's skyline, Sarah looked at the framed business card hanging in the center's entrance hall. Beside it hung photos documenting the center's transformation, the groundbreaking ceremony for the renovation, Lisa's kitchen opening day, and countless success stories of community members who had found their path forward. The story of a young girl helping a lost executive had evolved into something much bigger, a testament to how small acts of kindness could spark lasting change. But perhaps the most powerful lesson wasn't about business plans or community development. It was about seeing people for who they really are, beyond titles or circumstances, and recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute. In the end, the true measurement of success wasn't in dollars invested or loans approved, but in the simple truth Sarah had known all along, that we all rise higher when we rise together.